The system didn't knock. It never did. It simply appeared the moment I finished a night shift at the convenience store, when my feet were swollen and my brain felt like a dish sponge. A translucent panel slid into the corner of my vision, neat as a finance app, and a voice read it with the patience of a machine explaining a warranty. Mission assignment received. Objective: prevent Selene Hart from ending her life. Current fatality risk: 96%. The percentage blinked like a warning light. I waited for the rest, some heroic justification, some line about destiny, but the system only added, target's timeline is short. You are authorized to use disruptive intervention. Disruptive intervention sounded like a polite synonym for being unbearable, which was convenient, because unbearable was my most reliable skill. The system offered its usual options in a tone that implied professionalism. Recommended cover identities include therapist, personal assistant, caretaker, childhood friend. Therapist, I repeated, dragging my keyring from my apron pocket, so I can sit beside her bed and say, your feelings are valid, until she decides validity isn't enough. It is standard protocol, the system said. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. Standard protocol already failed. Her family hired the best. They paid for empathy like it was a premium subscription. The panel flickered and expanded, showing a sterile summary. A spectacular traffic accident, a severed career, a missing leg. Photographs followed Selene on stage in a white tutu, Selene at a gala in a black gown, Selene in a hospital room with winter light falling thinly across her shoulder. In the last photo, she stared out the window without blinking, as if she had already moved somewhere I couldn't follow. She has social support, the system insisted. She has resources. She has witnesses, I corrected. She has people who come to cry at her bedside so they can feel kind. The system paused, as if searching for the right algorithm to label my tone. Then what is your proposed approach, Nia Rowan? I looked at Celine's last photo again, at the stillness that didn't look like rest. If she's counting down, I said, it's because she thinks she's useless. So I'm going to give her work. Work? The system sounded scandalized, which was impressive for software. You will increase stress? I'll increase purpose, I said. Stress is when you're trapped. Purpose is when you choose. The system didn't approve, but it didn't stop me either. It never stopped me when my decisions were awful in an interesting way. Celine's hospital suite smelled like antiseptic and expensive flowers that had been left too long in water. The curtains were half open, letting in late afternoon sunlight that looked exhausted. Selene sat in a wheelchair angled toward the window. Her hair was tied back in the clean, disciplined style of someone who once lived by mirrors. She didn't turn when I entered. Her chest rose and fell, controlled and minimal, like she was conserving life. I cleared my throat and leaned into cheerfulness, as if it were a costume I'd borrowed. Selene Hart? She answered without looking at me. If you're here to tell me it gets better, save your breath. Her voice was not dramatic. It was simply empty, which was worse. I walked around until I was in her line of sight. Her eyes slid to me, took inventory, then dulled again. She didn't ask who sent me because she didn't care. Wealth had trained her to recognize visitors as temporary. I'm not here to comfort you, I said. That earned me a small blink. I'm here to ask you for a favor, I continued, as if this were normal. A big one. Celine's mouth tightened. I can't dance. I don't need you to dance, I said. I need you to come to Harborland with me. The faintest crack appeared in her expression. The kind you see on ice right before it breaks. Harborland is an amusement park. Correct, I said brightly. It's also a place where wheelchair users get priority lanes. If you go with me, I don't have to wait in line. You will be saving my precious time, which is priceless, because I have none. End quote. For the first time, Celine's eyes focused properly. Are you mocking me? No, I said. I'm exploiting capitalism's attempt at accessibility. It's different. Selene stared, as if I were a stray dog that had learned to talk. Behind my eyes, the system hissed. Risk rising. This approach is antagonistic. Good, I murmured in my mind. Antagonistic is alive. Selene finally looked away from the window and at me fully, her gaze sharp in a way her posture wasn't. Who are you? I smiled like we were meeting at a cafe instead of the edge of a cliff. Nia, we used to live on the same street when we were kids. You taught me how to play piano. That was a lie. It was also harmless. The system had already stitched the lie into the hospital's paperwork, into the nurse's memory, into the air itself. Celine searched her mind and found nothing. But she didn't bother correcting me. Her habits were refined. Her despair was thorough. "Leave," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Okay," I replied immediately. I stepped behind her chair, gripped the handles, and pushed. The chair rolled forward with a soft squeak. Celine's hands jerked to the armrests. "Stop." I said okay. I reminded her. "Okay means I'll leave after we do the favor. Harborland closes early." "Take me back," she demanded. "I will," I promised, tone sincere. Later, we passed the nurse's station. One nurse opened her mouth as if to object, then shut it, because the system had also made my visitor badge legitimate. I hated that part. I hated that paperwork could turn coercion into permission. I pushed anyway, because I was racing a number, and numbers don't care about ethics. In the elevator, Celine spoke quietly. "If you force me outside, I will call the police." "Great," I said. "Do it now. I'll wait." She didn't move. I watched her reflection in the elevator mirror. Chin lifted, eyes calm, phone untouched in her lap. A woman who had spent months avoiding the world was not going to summon strangers into her humiliation. Pride is a shield until it becomes a cage. The system muttered, "Risk is 97%. Then we're right on time," I thought back. Harborland was louder than the hospital by 1,000 degrees. Music poured from speakers. Children screamed with joy and sugar. A costumed mascot waved with the desperation of someone paid by the hour. Celine's wheelchair glided past crowds that never quite knew where to look, as if their eyes were magnets repelled by discomfort. A few stared too long, most glanced and moved on, busy with their own fun. At the first ride entrance, a staff member guided us into the priority lane without drama. We slipped past a 2-hour queue in about 4 minutes. Celine's jaw tightened. "I don't want to ride anything," she said, voice clipped. "Perfect," I replied. "You can sit and supervise my reckless decisions." The ride was a spinning pirate ship that tried to convince adults they were still brave. I strapped myself in, waved at Celine like she was royalty, and shouted over the safety announcements. "Behold, the Queen of Time has granted me passage." Celine stared at me with naked disbelief. When the pirate ship swung, my stomach tried to resign. I screamed, partly from fear, and partly because screaming is a useful reset button for the brain. When it ended, I stumbled out, legs shaking, and bowed exaggeratedly to Celine. "See, your contribution saved my life." "That was your choice," Celine said. "Exactly," I beamed. "You didn't have to do anything, and you still affected the outcome." "Isn't that insulting and wonderful?" Her lips twitched, almost a smile, then collapsed as if she didn't trust her own face. We moved through the park like that, me running toward every ridiculous ride, Celine refusing with a cold voice, then coming anyway because I didn't accept vetoes. I made up titles for her: Guardian of Short Lines, Patron Saint of Wrist Stamps, Empress of Accessible Entrances. Each joke was a small hammer tapping at the glass around her. By late afternoon, Celine's shoulders were lower, her hands unclenched on the armrests. She watched a family in another wheelchair lane, a father pushing a teenage boy who laughed openly, unashamed. She watched an elderly woman with a cane argue cheerfully with a grandchild about popcorn flavors. Nobody in the crowd treated them like tragedies. They were just people taking up space. At a bench near the parade route, Celine finally spoke without being prompted. "Why are you doing this?" I handed her a bottle of water and answered honestly. "Because lies weren't needed here. Because your world has shrunk to one room," I said. "I want you to remember the room isn't the whole building." Celine stared at the water. "You think a theme park fixes anything?" "No," I said. "I think evidence matters. Evidence that you can exist somewhere noisy without being destroyed." The systems panel flashed briefly, and the number dipped to 92%. The system didn't say anything, but I felt its reluctant recalibration like a sigh. When the sun slid toward the horizon, Celine's cheeks held a faint flush that wasn't just wind. Her face still carried sadness, but the sadness had been interrupted. An interruption is sometimes the first stage of survival. As we left, Celine's voice turned rigid again when she noticed we weren't heading back to the hospital. "Turn here," she said. "I can't," I replied. "Traffic is awful. Also, your hospital room has terrible lighting. We're going to your apartment." "I haven't been there," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why we're going." She fell silent. Silence was her favorite weapon, but it did nothing against forward motion. Celine's apartment was immaculate in the way abandoned places are. The air smelled faintly of expensive detergent and disuse. There were framed posters from her performances on the walls, each one a ghost in glossy paper. I parked her wheelchair near the couch and clapped my hands once like an overexcited roommate. "Home sweet home," I announced. Celine stared around the room as if it belonged to someone else. I didn't agree to this. "You agreed by not calling the police," I said, then softened my voice. "You can hate me later. Right now, you need food." I ordered a mountain of takeout and, while we waited, I did something the system had never taught me. I gave Celine permission to be angry. "If you want to yell," I said, "do it. If you want to insult me, do it. If you want to throw a pillow at my face, I will not sue." Celine stared at me, confused by the lack of pity. Pity is what she expected. Pity is easy to predict. What she didn't know how to handle was a person who treated her pain as real but not sacred. When the delivery arrived, I didn't jump up. Instead, I walked into the bedroom and made my voice carry. "Celine, I'm busy unpacking my stuff." I lied loudly. "Can you grab the food?" Behind my eyes, the system panicked. "She has limited mobility. This is inefficient." That's the point, I thought back. Outside the bedroom door, I listened. I heard the quiet click of the wheelchair adjusting, then the slow roll toward the entryway. Celine hesitated at the door as the delivery person waited. I could picture her rehearsing the moment, the glance, the awkward sympathy, the forced kindness that always tasted like condescension. Instead, the delivery person simply smiled and said, "Enjoy your meal," as if Celine were any other customer. The bag shifted into her lap. The door shut. Celine stared down at the takeout like it was evidence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set it on the counter. She was doing something small, and her body was reacting as if she'd performed a miracle. When I came out, I acted impressed beyond reason. "Look at you," I said. "A functional adult. I'm proud." Celine gave me a glare that had almost returned to its old sharpness. "Don't talk to me like a child." "Great," I said. "Talk to me like a coworker then, because tomorrow you're hiring me as your roommate." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" I launched into my second lie with dramatic suffering. "My apartment flooded. Everything is ruined. I have nowhere to go. I am a tragic heroine. Please let me stay." Celine stared so hard I expected her to see straight through me. Then, unexpectedly, she sighed. "Fine," she said. 1 week. 1 week, I echoed, relieved and triumphant. The system's panel flickered, and the risk dropped again, as if even its circuits understood that fine was a kind of yes. That night, after Celine went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with my phone in the system's glow. "You're going to open the studio now?" the system asked warily. "Already done," I replied, tapping a message thread with a landlord. "You got me a cover identity, so it's only fair I get us a workspace." The system hesitated. "You are deviating from approved emotional support models." "I'm not supporting her emotions," I said. "I'm supporting her agency." Silence fell in my head, thick as fog. Then the system said, quietly, "Proceed." I rented a small jewelry studio 2 blocks from Celine's building. Not because it was convenient for me, but because it was inconvenient for her to avoid. The space had a front showroom with glass cases, a back workroom with benches and lamps, and a little tea corner because I believed in bribing humans with sugar. The system, which loved efficiency, complained about the budget. I told it to file a complaint with the universe. The next morning I approached Celine with my most earnest face. "I need you," I said, as if I were asking for CPR. Celine's gaze flicked to my hands. "Money?" "No," I said. "A tax loophole." She blinked. I pointed at the studio brochure like it was a contract. "If a registered disabled person is listed as a co-owner or employee, the studio qualifies for certain benefits," I explained. "It's paperwork. It's legal. It's boring. It's also the difference between me eating instant noodles and me eating like a person." Celine's mouth tightened. "So you want to use me?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Openly. With consent. With a salary." The directness rattled her. She had spent months surrounded by people who approached her like a fragile vase, their kindness wrapped in lies. A person admitting selfishness was weirdly trustworthy. After a long pause, Celine asked, "What would I do?" "You'd sit at the tea corner and look intimidating," I said. "And if you feel like it, you can sketch. You have taste. You can't pretend you don't." Celine's eyes dipped, as if the compliment hurt. I haven't designed anything. You've worn more jewelry than most designers have seen, I said. Your eye has been trained by survival in a rich world. Use it. She stared at the brochure again, then finally nodded once, small and controlled. Fine, she said, with a new kind of steadiness. I'll help, but if you regret it, that's your problem. Perfect, I said. I'm collecting problems as a hobby. The first week was brutal in a quiet way. Celine sat stiffly behind the counter, speaking only when necessary. Customers glanced at the wheelchair and looked away quickly, embarrassed by their own attention. I worked my hands raw, polishing metal, adjusting settings, sketching designs. The systems panel stubbornly refused to move much. The risk hovered in the high 80s, as if Celine's body had joined the studio but her mind was still locked in the hospital room. I didn't push her to socialize. I pushed her to be needed. When I was busy, I asked Celine to hand me tools. When I carried boxes, I asked Celine to check the inventory list. When a customer asked for a specific chain length, I asked Celine for her opinion as if it were obvious she had one. Each task was tiny, but each task was a vote that her presence mattered. One afternoon, Tessa burst in, flushed with excitement. A blogger posted a clip of Celine, she said. It's getting traction. Celine's hand tightened around her pen. I glanced at the video. The clip framed Celine's profile, her lashes lowered as she sketched, sunlight turning her hair into copper threads. Comments poured in. Wheelchair goddess, tragic muse, broken swan. Every compliment was a cage with glitter. Tessa said, "We should livestream. If we ride the trend, sales will explode." The system piped up in my head, eager. Increased exposure improves studio stability. Recommendation. Accept. I watched Celine's knuckles whiten. The trend was not about her skill. It was about her wound. No, I said. Tessa's face fell. Why not? Because I'm not selling her pain, I replied. Celine looked up slowly. Her eyes held something wary, like a stray animal deciding whether a hand is safe. You're refusing money, she said, voice quiet. For me? For you, I confirmed. If you ever decide to use your story, that will be your decision, not a marketing strategy. Celine didn't smile. She didn't thank me. Instead, she looked down at her sketchbook again, and the tension in her shoulders eased by a fraction, as if respect were a brace holding up a crumbling wall. That night, the systems panel dipped to 78% without warning. The system sounded baffled. Why did the risk decrease? No major intervention occurred. I washed teacups and answered simply, because you can't heal while someone is auctioning off your scars. The first real shift happened on a Saturday when the studio was busy enough to make the air feel thick. Customers flowed in and out, jangling the door chime, leaving behind perfume and impatience. I was stuck at the back bench soldering a clasp when I noticed a young woman lingering at the entrance. She looked like a college student, cheap sneakers, backpack straps clenched in a death grip. She hovered as if stepping inside would trigger an alarm. Tessa moved to greet her. But I caught Tessa's sleeve and shook my head. Let Celine, I mouthed. Tessa frowned, confused, but obeyed. Celine rolled forward slowly, her posture carefully neutral. When she reached the student, she spoke in the same calm voice she used with strangers. Can I help you? The student swallowed. I want a birthday gift for my mom, she said. Something small. My friend said you have pretty things. Her eyes darted toward the glass cases, then down to the floor, as if price tags were a threat. Celine's gaze sharpened in the way a good dancer's gaze sharpens. Focus without cruelty. What is your mom like? She asked. The student blinked, startled by the normal question. She wears simple stuff, she admitted. She works a lot. She doesn't buy things for herself. Celine nodded, absorbed. She showed the student a delicate pendant shaped like a tiny wave. This one, she said. It's not loud, but it's meaningful. If your mom is tired, she can touch it, and remember she has someone thinking about her. The student's eyes watered. It's too expensive, she whispered automatically, even before seeing the price. Celine paused for half a second, then lowered her voice. If I tell you it's on a weekend discount, will you promise not to mention it to the owner? I nearly choked on laughter behind the counter. Celine was bad at stealth, but her sincerity made it charming. The student hesitated. Is that allowed? Celine's expression turned faintly conspiratorial. Sometimes kindness is allowed, she said, The student laughed, a small sound that broke the tension. She paid, hugged the gift bag to her chest like a treasure, and left with her shoulders lighter. Celine watched her go, then turned back toward the counter. Her face was composed, but there was a softness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She rolled closer to me and said, almost defensively, "I can cover the discount from my salary." I waved a hand. "It's fine," I said. "You just bought yourself something more useful than money." Celine frowned. "What?" "A memory," I said. "Proof that you can make someone's life better without being on a stage." The systems panel flashed. 78% dropped to 61% so fast it looked like a glitch. The system's voice wobbled. "Significant improvement detected." Celine didn't react to the numbers, but her breathing was deeper than before. It was as if she had realized, in her bones, that usefulness could be quiet and still be real. Of course, the story didn't like that. Stories that feed on tragedy hate it when the victim learns to stand in a different way. 2 weeks after the studio clip went viral, the door chime rang and the air seemed to tighten. Celine's hands froze above her sketchbook. I looked up and saw Adrian Vale step inside, like he owned the floor. He wore a tailored coat and the practiced regret of a man who was used to being forgiven. Ivy Crane hung off his arm, a smile painted on her mouth like a brand. "Celine," Ivy said sweetly, "it really is you. I've been so worried." Celine's face went pale, the color draining with surgical speed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was the sound of old pain climbing back into the room. Adrian's gaze flicked down to the wheelchair, then back up too quickly. "Why are you here?" he asked, as if the studio were the problem. "You should be resting, if something happens." "If something happens, you can post a black and white photo and collect sympathy," I said, smiling brightly. "Hello, I'm Nia. I run this place, and I'm allergic to nonsense." Ivy's smile twitched. "Excuse me?" I kept my expression friendly enough to be plausible. "You must be Ivy," I said. "Celine mentioned you." Celine hadn't mentioned Ivy once. I was inventing a world where Celine had spoken freely, because that world irritated Ivy more than any insult. Adrian's face tightened. "Celine, who is she?" I answered for Celine. "I'm the person who has been feeding her and dragging her outside and paying her to be useful," I said, "which, judging from your schedule, was not your hobby." Ivy let out a little laugh that sounded rehearsed. "Nia, right? You misunderstand. Adrian has been taking care of me lately because I just came back from overseas. Celine is delicate now." Delicate. The word hit Celine like a slap. Her jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. I stepped closer to the counter and leaned in, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. "Oh," I said, "so you're the type who calls an affair childhood friendship because it sounds less disgusting." Ivy's eyes widened. "How dare you?" Adrian's tone hardened. "Watch your words." I nodded as if he'd given me useful advice. "Sure," I said. "Here are better words. Coward, performer, and man who couldn't break up cleanly because he wanted to keep his devoted boyfriend reputation intact." Adrian's face flushed. Ivy's nails dug into his sleeve. I kept going, still smiling, still polite enough that the cruelty landed cleanly. "You spent months building a public narrative about how much you suffered beside Celine," I said. "You turned her injury into your virtue. Then you disappeared the moment her pain stopped making you look good." Celine's hand trembled on her lap. I saw the system's panel spike, then wobble, then hold, as if even the algorithm was holding its breath. Adrian swallowed, searching for an angle that would make him the protagonist again. "Celine," he said softly, "I never blamed you. I didn't know how to handle it." Celine finally lifted her head. Her voice was steady when it came, steady like a dancer hitting a mark. "You didn't know how to love me without being applauded," she said. Adrian flinched. Celine continued, each word calm and heavy. "I don't hate you for failing. I hate you for lying. You let me believe you were still here while you were already leaving." She took a slow breath. "We're done." Adrian's mouth opened. "Celine, we're done," Celine repeated. And the repetition wasn't weakness. It was closure. Ivy recovered first. Because cruel people are efficient. Her smile returned, sharp. "If that's how it is," she said, "then at least do me a favor. Adrian's birthday gala is next month. I need jewelry. You're designing now, right? Make me something." I turned to Celine, ready to refuse on her behalf, and then throw Ivy out like trash. Celine surprised me by answering, "Okay." I stared. Celine? She looked at Ivy with a calm that felt colder than anger. I'll design it, she said, because it will be good, and because everyone at that gala will see it. Ivy's eyes narrowed, suspicious, but greed won. Fine, she said, once more, but with a different weight. Don't embarrass yourself. They left. The studio air felt cleaner immediately, as if a window had opened. I rushed around the counter. Why did you agree? I demanded, half furious, half impressed. Celine's gaze didn't waver. Because I'm tired of being a rumor, she said. If people are going to talk, they can talk about my work. The systems panel dipped again, quietly, like a tide pulling back from shore. Celine threw herself into the design the way she used to throw herself into rehearsal, precise, relentless, unwilling to be mediocre. She chose a deep blue sapphire that looked like night under glass, then surrounded it with small diamonds set in a spiral that suggested movement. It should look like a galaxy, she said, pencil flying. Not a sad one, a loud one. We named it Milky Way because Celine refused melodrama and I refused subtlety. The piece took weeks. Celine worked until her fingertips cramped, then shook them out and continued. Tessa watched, impressed, and slightly afraid. The system hovered in my head, muttering equations about probability and social reach. When Ivy returned to try it on, she arrived with her old arrogance and a backup necklace in her purse, convinced Celine's design would be inferior. Then Celine fastened Milky Way around her neck, and the room went silent. The sapphire caught the studio light and held it like a secret. The spiral of diamonds scattered reflections across Ivy's collarbones as if stars had landed on skin. Ivy stared at herself in the mirror and forgot to smirk. That's mine, she whispered, not meaning ownership of the necklace, but meaning attention. Celine's voice was even. It's yours for the gala, she said. After that, it belongs to my portfolio. Ivy recovered and forced a laugh. You did. Acceptable, she said, as if praise cost her money. I smiled. Careful, I told her. If you wear it, people might assume you have taste. Ivy glared, but she didn't take the necklace off. The gala night arrived with glitter, cameras, and the kind of rich boredom that smells like champagne. Celine refused to attend. I don't need to watch them, she said. I need them to watch the work. We walked in the park instead, as if choosing quiet were our revenge. Halfway through, the system pinged like a happy notification. Adrian Vale's public reputation is impacted, it reported. His father has reassigned him to an overseas project. Probability of further harm to target has decreased. I laughed. Send him to a desert, I suggested. Let him learn humility. The system didn't understand humor, but it sounded pleased anyway. Back at the studio, the next morning, Celine's phone flooded with messages. Photos from the gala had spread. Ivy posing with Milky Way glowing on her throat. Comment sections argued about the designer. Some recognized Celine from ballet and treated her like a fallen celebrity. Others asked about commissions without caring who she used to be. Celine scrolled in silence, then set the phone down slowly, as if afraid the world would take it back. They want my work, she said. They want your value, I corrected. Different thing. Celine nodded once. The nod looked like someone accepting gravity rather than fighting it. A week later, the neighborhood kids found us during our after-dinner walk. They were sweaty and angry, clutching a soccer ball like it was a grievance. The leader, a boy named June, pointed at a small field where teenagers were playing. They brought a college guy, he complained. He's too big. It's cheating. I looked at Celine with my most innocent face. We can help, I said. Celine narrowed her eyes. No. Yes, June insisted. Please, we need a goalkeeper. Celine's mouth opened to refuse, then closed as she realized June was looking at her not with pity, but with expectation. Expectation is a strange kind of respect. I patted the back of her wheelchair. Congratulations, I told her. You've been promoted to guardian of the goal? Celine stared at me. Nia, she said flatly. Do you view me as a person? Sometimes, I said. Mostly I view you as an unfair advantage. June and his friends whooped and pushed Celine toward the goal as if she were a lucky mascot. Celine protested, but the protests were half-hearted, and when the first shot rolled toward her, she blocked it easily with her hands. The kids squealed. The teenagers, embarrassed to lose to a wheelchair goalkeeper, kicked softer, which only made Celine's job easier. Our team won. The children ran in circles, yelling Celine's name like it belonged on a stadium wall. Celine laughed a real laugh, startled out of her body, and for a moment she looked younger than her grief. On the way home, she said quietly, "I forgot what it feels like to be included without being handled." I kept my eyes on the sidewalk. "Good," I said. "Don't forget again." The message from Celine's mother arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Celine stared at the screen for a long time before reading it aloud. "A friend in Paris runs a jewelry house," she said. "She likes the Milky Way piece. She wants to meet. She can arrange access and training." Celine's voice was steady, but her fingers worried the edge of the phone. Her family had been absent in a careful way, absent with plausible excuses. Now they were interested again because her usefulness had returned in a form that impressed other wealthy people. I didn't tell Celine what to feel. Instead, I asked, "Do you want to go?" Celine stared at the rain sliding down the window. "Yes," she said. "Not for her. For me." That answer was everything. The flight to Paris came with the awkward choreography of assistance. Priority boarding, careful ramps, strangers asking too many questions. Celine handled it with a new skill she'd learned in the studio. Directness. When a man tried to push her chair without asking, Celine said, "Stop," in a voice that left no room for negotiation. The man apologized, embarrassed. Celine didn't soothe him. That was progress. Paris smelled like wet stone and bread. The jewelry house Celine's mother's friend ran was old, with carved doors and a workroom that buzzed with quiet concentration. The owner, a woman named Camille, greeted Celine not with pity, but with curiosity. "Show me your hands," Camille said, then watched Celine sketch for 5 minutes and nodded. "You have discipline," she said. "Discipline survives injuries." Celine blinked hard at that, as if the words had found a place inside her that still ached. During the week, Celine toured ateliers, learned new cutting techniques, argued about metal thickness, and laughed with apprentices who didn't care that she used a chair. At night, we walked by the river, and Celine talked about ballet without collapsing. She said the word leg like it was a body part, not a curse. On our last evening, we stood on a bridge, while the water carried the city's lights downstream. Celine's chair was still, but her gaze moved, tracking reflections like a dancer tracking counts. "Nia," she said, and her voice held a softness she used rarely. "When you dragged me out of that hospital, I thought you were cruel." "I was," I admitted. "I'm still kind of cruel." "You were also normal," she said. "You didn't treat me like a monument. You treated me like a coworker, like an inconvenience, like someone who could be useful." I swallowed, surprised by how tight my throat felt. "Because you are," I said. Celine nodded slowly. "I don't know how to repay you." "Don't," I said. "Repayment makes it transactional. Just live. Be annoying. Keep designing. Call me when you're furious. Eat dinner like it matters." Celine's lips curved in a small, tired smile. "You always order too much food," she said. "It's a trauma response," I said. Celine looked at the river again. "I used to think I had one ending," she said. "A quiet one, a clean one." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think endings are a choice," she replied, "and I'm not done choosing." Behind my eyes, the systems panel flickered one final time. Risk, 3%, then 2%, then 1%. The bar filled with a soft chime, like a task completed without fanfare. The system spoke quietly, almost gentle. "Mission success. Target is stable." For once, it didn't sound triumphant. It sounded relieved. The system offered me another assignment immediately, as if it couldn't stand empty space. I ignored it. The world could wait. Celine turned her chair away from the railing. "Come on," she said. "We're late." "Late for what?" I asked. Celine's eyes flashed with the old spark that used to light up stages. "Late for our life," she said. "We still have work to do." We rolled off the bridge together, the city noisy around us, the river steady beneath us, and the future messy, ordinary, unromantic, finally big enough to breathe in. In the months that followed, Celine refused to become a symbol for anyone's comfort. She declined interviews that framed her as inspirational, in the lazy way the word is often used, and she accepted invitations that treated her as a professional. She redesigned the studio's layout so every bench was reachable, not as a concession, but as a statement that the space belonged to her too. She taught Tessa how to judge a gemstone's clarity by light and patience, and Tessa stopped staring at the wheelchair as if it were a warning label. Celine began keeping a small notebook of customer stories, not for marketing, but to remind herself that value is often borrowed from connection. She practiced asking for help with specific words, and she practiced accepting no without turning it into shame. On mornings when grief arrived early, she brewed tea, sat in sunlight, and waited for the feeling to loosen its grip instead of fighting it. She built a ramp for the studio's tiny backstep and painted it the same color as the floor, so it looked like architecture rather than apology. Camille mailed her a box of old tools with worn wooden handles, and Celine treated them like heirlooms she had earned. When her mother tried to rewrite their history, Celine corrected the timeline calmly and ended the call before the old guilt could take over. A dancer from Celine's past visited the studio and cried, then stopped crying when Celine handed her a polishing cloth and said, "Help me." Celine designed a bracelet for June's team with tiny star charms, and the kids wore them like medals even when they lost. Adrien attempted one final apology by email, and Celine deleted it without reading, proving that curiosity no longer belonged to him. The system's silence felt strange at first, but silence became a comfort when it stopped being a threat. Back home, the studio changed shape the way a body changes after learning a new movement. Celine rearranged the display cases, so customers had to look at the jewelry first and only notice the wheelchair later, if at all. She installed brighter lamps over the workbenches and insisted on a mirror at standing height and another at sitting height, because she said design should never assume a single posture. She started coming in early to open the shop herself, not because she didn't trust anyone, but because she wanted to touch the lock, hear the click, and know the day had begun by her own hand. Tessa learned to ask, "Would you like assistance?" instead of grabbing, and the small change made the room feel safer. Customers gradually stopped lowering their voices around Celine, and when someone did, Celine would answer at a normal volume and force the world to match her. Camille sent emails full of blunt notes: "Tighten the prongs, soften the curve, let the stone breathe." Celine took the criticism like a professional, not like a wounded person, and she began replying with her own arguments. The first time Camille wrote back, "Good, defend your choices." Celine stared at the screen for a full minute, then let out a laugh that startled Tessa and made the tea kettle rattle. Jun and his friends kept wandering in after school, pretending they were browsing. Celine started giving them tiny jobs, wiping fingerprints off glass, learning the difference between gold and brass, counting beads into jars. They did it with the seriousness of surgeons. When June asked why she trusted them, Celine said, "Because you don't treat me like a headline." The system stayed quiet, but I could still feel it watching. One evening, after we closed, it asked softly, "Why did you reject the standard comfort protocol?" I didn't stop cleaning the counter as I answered. "Comfort can be a blanket," I said. "Sometimes a blanket becomes a lid." The system went silent again, as if filing that sentence somewhere it didn't have a folder for. Celine's mother called more often after Paris, and the calls arrived with layered intentions. Some were genuine concern, delivered awkwardly. Some were networking, delivered smoothly. Celine learned to separate the two without apologizing. When her mother tried to take credit for the Paris introduction as proof of love, Celine didn't argue. She simply said, "Thank you for the connection," and changed the topic to gemstones, which was a boundary disguised as polite conversation. Later, when her mother hinted that Celine should return to the family business to stabilize her future, Celine replied, "My future is already stable. It's on my workbench." Adrien's name drifted back into conversation only once, when a mutual acquaintance brought him up like a cautionary tale. Celine listened, expression unreadable, then asked about the person's new job instead. The refusal to participate felt like victory in its quietest form. As autumn arrived, Celine hosted a small workshop for local artists with disabilities. She didn't frame it as inspiration. She framed it as technique. She taught how to choose tools that reduce strain, how to design around limited grip strength, how to negotiate with suppliers who assume incompetence. A young man with tremors made a ring that looked like a storm caught in metal, and Celine praised the concept, not the struggle. Watching her teach, I realized she had become what she needed in the hospital, someone who treated limitation as a parameter, not a verdict. On the anniversary of the accident, Celine asked me to drive her back to the theater district. We parked across from the stage door she used to enter through, the door that now looked too narrow for the memories attached to it. Celine sat for a long time without speaking. Finally, she said, "I used to think the building was my whole life." She glanced at the street, at the people hurrying past with coffee cups and umbrellas. "Now it's just a building." Then she turned her chair and asked me where we should eat, because she wanted noodles. and she wanted them immediately. In winter, when holiday advertisements turned every street into a glittering argument about happiness, Celine didn't hide. She worked. She designed a set of earrings shaped like tiny crescents and called them second moons, because she said even a partial light can guide you. She gave the first pair to Tessa as a bonus and pretended it was a test sample. She gave the second pair to Jun's little sister, who wore them to a school concert and claimed she sang better because the earrings were lucky. Celine rolled her eyes and looked secretly pleased. Sometimes, late at night, Celine would still go quiet in a way that told me the old cliff was nearby. When that happened, I didn't give speeches. I made tea. I asked her to help me decide between two chain styles. I handed her a problem that required her brain. She would frown, analyze, and then argue with me, and the argument would pull her back into the room. It wasn't magic. It was practice. By the time spring returned, the studio's reputation had shifted. People no longer came to stare at the former ballerina in a wheelchair. They came because Celine's work made them feel seen. A bride asked for a necklace that held her late father's handwriting in tiny engraved lines, and Celine designed it with a steadiness that looked like respect. A nurse ordered a pendant for herself, something she could touch during long shifts, and Celine chose a stone that warmed quickly in the hand. Each commission was a conversation, and Celine treated every conversation as proof that she belonged here. One afternoon, while I was stacking delivery boxes, the system returned with a new mission prompt. I glanced at the hovering panel and then at Celine, who was laughing with Tessa about a customer's dramatic proposal story. The number on Celine's file was gone, replaced by a simple word, stable. I closed the panel without answering.